After over €2 billion spent in just 13 years, we discuss why Paris Saint-Germain have failed to win the Champions League and whether the tide is set to turn. We look at the impact of Kylian Mbappe leaving and whether their smarter approach in the transfer market can guide them to European glory. This is why this year might finally be PSG's chance to win the Champions League. Alright, let's talk about PSG's Champions League past then. We're going to start when Nasser El Khelaïfi took over the team in 2011 when he bought PSG with Qatari Sports Investments, because I think his goal when he came in was to win the Champions League, was to become the biggest team in club football. How can you do when they haven't won it in 15 years, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, it is very surprising. I think it's always the dream, isn't it? When you're a big owner, you come in and you go, I'm going to spend as much money as possible to be the best. That's what the rich people do. We've seen it happen before. Man City is another prime example. Difference is, over there, it's actually worked. For PSG, it's been a huge failure all round, really.
Yeah, I mean, we've got this graph then of PSG's Champions League history since El Khelaïfi took over, and as obviously they had that final in 2020, but as you can see, only 3 times in 15 years have they appeared in the semi-finals. A lot of round of 16 knockouts, a lot of quarter-final knockouts. That's not the sort of path you want to have if you're aiming to win the Champions League. Only one final in that time. They lost, obviously, to Bayern Munich in 2020, but they'd have been hoping to have done more by now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's surprising because they haven't even, as you say, they got to the final, but apart from that, they haven't really got close. And usually, even when when you spend the volume of money they've got in their arsenal, when you have owners come in who have so much money behind them and backing behind them, it's laughable sometimes how far off they are in terms of they've barely challenged for the trophy. And for PSG, on a more disappointing note, it's a really disappointing failure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got to consider the added caveat that PSG weren't a top team when El Khelaïfi took over. So to transform them from being a team who were fairly consistently mid-table top half into a team who have won the French league more times than they haven't, they've been absolutely dominant in that division. Not to the same extent that teams like Bayern Munich have been, because there have been teams like Lille, like Monaco, who've broken that mould. So It's not just been PSG in the last 15 years, but quite consistently they win the league title, which, given the amount of money they've spent, shouldn't be a huge achievement, but they have never cracked the Champions League. Let's actually break down that spending then, because a lot of people go, well, PSG have just bought the league, and sometimes you might think that's a little bit hyperbolic, but when you look at the numbers, how you can think anything different is beyond me. They have received £802 million in transfer fees. They've spent €2.21 billion.
Yeah.
€2 billion in that time on transfers. That gives them a net spend of €1.42 billion. That is a ridiculous figure.
That's huge,
and to have not won the Champions League.
I think this is why it's more of a failure than other teams, because even at other projects, it's not. It's the, like, as you say, people will just, as a throwaway statement, they'll just say, PSG just buy everything. They buy the league. There's no point. But and some people go, it's a bit harsh. That's not that's not quite the reality of it. It is the reality of it. If you look at it, it is quite literally what people are saying, which is a bizarre thing, because usually, as you say, it's a bit of a it's a meaningless statement when you just say that a team is just buying it or just spending money. But that's exactly what PSG have done, and sadly for them, money has not equalled success.
No, I mean, some notable seasons in there. Obviously, you've got the early days when you're signing Cavani, Ibra, Thiago Silva, Thiago Motta, everyone they could find called Thiago. Those sorts of players. You've got those early 100 millions in the start of the 2010s. Towards the end of the 2010s, those big figures, you've got 2017-18 and 2018-19, €238 million, €262 million. They were the years they bought Neymar and then obviously loaned and bought Mbappe. So you can see the big figures there. The most notable one, though, came last summer, where they spent €454 million.
On what?
Well, exactly. They bought Randall Colomawani for almost 100. They bought Goncalo Ramos for almost 100. Are either of those players that are probably worth that? Probably not. They brought Manuel Ugarte. It was a truly bizarre window that they managed to spend that much money and seemingly got nothing from it. Obviously, I know they sold Neymar, which was €90 million, which was a huge overpayment, but that's Saudi Arabia for you. And they did receive 207 million in the end. So you can see why they had the money to spend that. But 454 million euros is ridiculous.
That's mental. And I think, if they'd spent that 450 in a summer where they had, spent all that, when they did spend all that money on Neymar, acceptable. But they haven't gone, it's not even like half of that has been splashed on one incredible player. It's just been a catalogue of errors with the spending. It is quite literally like you just give a kid all the money they want and you just let them walk into every shop they want and they buy everything they want. It's just a spending spree with no logical explanation as to why they're doing it.
Yeah.
It's incredible how that's £500 million this summer. And I mean, I look at it and I go, well, I think the players they bought in, do I think they all total £500 million? No, I don't.
No, probably not. I mean, I don't think anyone could equate to that amount of money, of course. But to spend that and come away with nothing. There are some clubs whose entire net spend since their foundation in the Football League wouldn't come to within a tenth of that. And yet they are competing in, like, the Championship, for example. So, I get when people say, oh, you know what, yeah, PSG have spent a lot of money. But equally, they have done okay. But they've spent an awful lot of money and they've not really got anywhere.
This is a different level.
This summer, though, it does seem to be an improvement. And to be fair, they spent a lot of money last summer, and a lot of them didn't work out. But they are starting to move in a more positive direction. They're signing younger talents. Sometimes they just decide not to play them, in the case of Xavi Simons, but they are trying to sign younger talents to then bleed into the first team and then create a good team. And they do seem to be playing well at the moment, and it does lead you to believe this might be a change in fortunes for PSG. Not literally, because if they change their fortunes are already ridiculously rich. They don't want to change those fortunes, but they might start getting towards Champions League glory. So let's look at what they've done this summer. Then we'll start with the outgoings, because a lot of them are just loans and frees, and then they just spent loads of money anyway. So Hugo Ekitike went out to, well, he was on loan at Frankfurt. He then left permanently, 16.5 million euros. Kylian Mbappe, of course, the big saga over the summer, left on a free transfer. How would they replace him? They didn't. And then that was part of smart recruitment last summer. They realised what was going to happen. They didn't need really to replace him this summer. They let Xavi Simons go out on loan for some reason. They've let Renato Sanchez go on loan to Benfica because that was a silly signing. They went and bought a player who had like 2 good Ligue 1 campaigns and went, yeah, that seems like a great idea. Gabriel Moscardo, their youngster, he got a few first team minutes last season, but he has been loaned out to Reims for some match experience. Nordi Mukiele, who seems to be on his way out, he's been loaned to Bayer Leverkusen. Obviously with Manuel Ugarte, they've just conned 50 million euros out of Manchester United, which is perhaps the smartest thing you can do, is just offer players to Man United and see what happens. Then a loan move, Carlos Soler has just joined West Ham and Danilo Pereira to Al Ittihad. So a lot of business out, some weird ones in there. Yeah,
I mean, there's some in there. Obviously, the Mbappe one was the big one. I think, I think to talk about that, there's pros and cons to it. I think, obviously, the cons is the fact that you lost a player who you probably could have got over £100 million for, and he went for nothing. But
that's no problem for PSG.
That isn't. They don't care.
The only club in the world where they can lose a player worth 200 million for free is PSG. It's the only club in the world who wouldn't worry about that.
But I think the pro was definitely, you lose that, because PSG losing Mbappe in the summer, I feel at the start of this season that weight has dropped of being Mbappe FC. And now they're actually seen as a football club, as a team. The tactic isn't just to give the ball to Mbappe, and it's when he plays well, they win, and when he plays badly, they lose, and that's all you hear about. It definitely feels like we're seeing more of a team effort and team cohesion at PSG to start this season. So that's the big pro there. My other thing with the outgoings is it's the ones you forget about. Nordi Mukiele. I mean, bought him from Leipzig.
And he was well rated at Leipzig.
He was, and he was a very good right back, and then he's just disappeared for PSG, and now he's at Leverkusen, where he'll probably do quite well. But it's just they probably spent a really strong figure on him, and it's just the players that just seem to forget about. But as you say, to PSG, it doesn't matter. I feel like sometimes you have to judge PSG as a different football club to the rest, because the rest of them are working out how they can try and maximise or minimise the losses. PSG, They don't have losses. They don't deal with losses.
But I think it impacts them negatively because there is no... When you consider transfer business in the Premier League, you have to consider, is this player going to work now? Is this player going to work in 5 years? Are we going to make profit on them? With PSG, they can just throw money at whatever they want and just see if it works. Because if it doesn't, they can throw them out and bring in another player the next year. And the problem with that method is that you don't take the forethought. You don't plan everything out methodically. It's why so much of their business has been short-sighted. Oh, Neymar's available for 200 million. Let's just go and break the transfer market and spend 200 million on him. Lionel Messi was available for free. Does he fit in the squad? We don't know. We're just gonna. It looks cool, doesn't it, on the promotional material if we have Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi, despite the fact that none of them are going to press. So that was never going to work. But yeah, it just doesn't feel like anything they do is geared towards, building a brilliant footballing team. It is just, it's all over the place, the recruitment. It's just a complete mess. And you'd think for that much money you would be smart, you'd go out and make the right signings, but they are just spunking cash on whatever they fancy and seeing if it works. And it's not at the moment. It's
not surprising. This is the first year in many, many years where finally PSG have lost all three of Mbappe, Neymar and Messi. And that, I make it sound like a relief because I think it is. And you look at the start of this season, you look at who they brought in over the summer and who's performing well at the moment. I think it is. It's really showing. Now those three big egos have all left the club. PSG can now really start to build something and start to thrive.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you there. I think you've lost a lot of players who were okay for Ligue 1, but ultimately didn't work in the system. There's a reason that if you played Ronaldo and Messi together, it wouldn't work. Because neither of them are going to do any of the defensive work. No. And you had the same thing when you put Neymar, Mbappe and Messi in a front three, because none of them do the defensive work. And while that might have worked in 2015, where pressing wasn't really as big a thing, obviously there was still pressing, but it wasn't as big. I think obviously we've seen that didn't work at PSG, and they just don't seem to realise stuff like that. It's mind-blowing that they don't seem to notice things like that. But this season they are pressing, which does make a nice change, and it is working out for them. So let's look at what they've done in the transfer market then. They signed Matvey Safonov from Krasnodar. Now, I'll be honest, I had no idea who this bloke was. He's a 25-year-old Russian goalkeeper they've spent 20 million euros on. It looks, for all the world, like a money laundering scheme, but maybe he's a great goalkeeper. He's going to come in and be a backup to Gianluigi Donnarumma. They've got Arnaud Tenas as well, so they didn't really need him, but he's here and he's happy.
20 million on a second/third choice goalkeeper is a choice that no other football club in the world would make. But they've done it. And as you say, he could turn out to be very good.
Yeah, they could have gone and got a free transfer for someone that's just going to come play backup or third choice. They haven't. They've gone and got a Russian from Krasnodar. So they're happy. João Neves has come in from Benfica. This is a transfer I'm really excited about. And to be fair, they got a decent fee, 60 million euros. And he's looked spectacular to start the season. He's playing a slightly more advanced role than what we expected, and we're seeing him chip in with a lot of assists in Ligue 1. The big question mark is, will that transfer over to the Champions League? And I know it's not the same situation, but we saw it with Ugarte last season, who came from the Portuguese league, where he was okay in Ligue 1, but he would pounce too often, and he'd make too many errors for the Champions League, so they didn't play him in those games. João Neves, I think, will be different because he's not like Ugarte. Ugarte jumps on players too quickly, then leaves loads of space behind him, and the team he's playing for get caught out. João Neves is much more well-tempered, a very good player. He's also not a defensive midfielder in the same way Ugarte is. Neves is a creative player, and he is very good at that. I rate him highly. I thought it was a shame when he went to PSG because PSG don't usually make players very good. Yeah. But he has blossomed so far, so it's going to be interesting to see whether that can continue. They also signed William Pacho, who I think is a very good centre-half, left-footed centre-half from Eintracht Frankfurt. This is a good signing. 40 million euros, a solid left centre-half option. They didn't really need a left centre-half because they have Beraldo, they've got Lucas Hernandez who can play there, and once Presnel Kimpembe returns from his just constant injury crisis, I think we will, there'll be a lot of competition for places there. But Pacho, I think, is an upgrade on those players. So you can also make the argument that, Hernandez and Kimpembe are injury prone, and Beraldo's a little bit erratic. So maybe the 40 million outlay is worth it. It's not a huge fee, and I think with right centre half, you've got Marquinhos and Skriniar. that works quite nicely as a partnership. So, yeah, 2 right centre-halves who are a bit stronger and older, and then a really young and quick and mobile left centre-half. It's quite a nice partnership. It's smart recruitment. And then there's an option on the left wing as well to, a sort of Mbappe replacement, more just filling in the gaps in the squad. Desiree Doué. He came through at Stade Rennais, playing in central midfield. He's now moved out to the left wing. And he's very much made that his own this season. That's got him this move to PSG. He's not played lots yet for PSG, but we will hopefully see him integrated into the squad, especially once Champions League rotation becomes a thing. But yeah, 50 million euros on him. So, as I say, big window, 169 million. They only made 71 million in the transfer market. They have never turned a profit, by the way, PSG. Since El Khalifa came in fact, one season, 2019-20, they only spent 95 million, then they received 112 million. So that was a big turn up for the Blacks. Other than that, they have lost money in every single window. But yeah, this season it doesn't seem to be working. So let's look at what the squad looks like then on paper. In goal, Gianluigi Donnarumma is still a top goalkeeper. I do think he's, probably not on the level of the world's most elite keepers that I think a lot of people wrongly compare him to, but he's still a top goalkeeper, and we saw that in Euro 2020 when he was playing for Italy. Fantastic in that tournament. So, yeah, he's still a top keeper. I don't think he's right at the top level, but he is very good. And then you've got Safanov and Tenas as well, of course, but Donnarumma has not had any real injury concerns, so they shouldn't need to use them. Then in the back 4 at left back, they've got Mendes and they've got Lucas Hernandez. Hernandez is still out injured, but we've seen Beraldo go and play there a few times this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did use that in the Champions League this year, because you could play a situational back 3 and get Hakimi to push on, which gives you a huge bonus of Hakimi playing higher up the field. Then at centre-half, left centre-half is Pacho, Beraldes and Kimpembe. Again, Kimpembe has played very little football for a very long time now, but he could come in and do a good job eventually. But that'll mainly be Pacho and Beraldo when Beraldo's playing centre-half and not left-back. Centre-half, they've got Marquinhos, Skriniar. They're fine there. And then at right-back, we're seeing something that I really like from Enrique this season, which is where there's gaps in the squad, rather than asking Nasser El Khalifi for another 50 million, he's bringing in youth players. Yeah. And we've seen it at right-back where Zague has been given a few opportunities this season, or we think will be given opportunities this season. He's been involved in the first-team squad. Hakimi's going to start, but he is a good backup option, and they could put Skriniar or someone like that there if Hakimi was to get injured and they needed some sort of longer-term solution. And then in midfield, they've tended to their midfield 3 so far this season has been Neves, Vitinha and Zaire Emery. That's a really well-balanced midfield. Yeah. The 3 of them complement each other quite nicely. I think Vitinha's been playing as a deeper of the 3, but Zaire Emery can do that, Neves can do that, so it's quite interchangeable between the 3 roles. They're all quite creative players. They are all a bit similar, but they do have some little differences, which means the midfield has worked so far. It does lack experience, but you have got Fabian who can come into midfield for Champions League nights. If they're playing a weaker opponent, which we've seen, I think, against Montpellier, they started Lee Kang in, which does make sense because I think he's a player who is a bit more attacking. Now, he can also play on the right-hand side, but there is competition for places there. On the right-hand side, as I say, Dembele and Asensio. Kang and Lee can play there. We think Dembele will probably start every game if he's fit because he's looked really good to start this season. Asensio's played through the middle as a false 9 type role, but once Ramos is back from injury and Mawani is playing well, I think we'll see Asensio back on that right flank rotating with Dembele. As I say, up front, Ramos, he got injured after, I think, 20 minutes in the first game of the season, so we've not seen much of him, but once he's back, I think he'll start in that role. Ranako Mwani, he also had some injury troubles. I think, he also didn't perform particularly well when he came off the bench for Ramos. So I think, it'll be interesting to see whether he can force his way back into starting contention. And then on the left flank, Barcola and Doué. That's a really nice rotation. And the player I really want to mention here is Bradley Barcola, because he has started the season fantastically. Up until, when I started making the graphics and writing everything for this video, he scored in every single game. Of course, then he only got 23 minutes against Belgium and he didn't score. But he has been in electric form nonetheless. He got 1 goal in their 4-1 opening day win against Le Havre. Then they played Montpellier 6-0 and he scored twice and he was brought off after an hour. So he'd only played 80 minutes by that point. Yeah. and was already on 3 goals. Then he got 74 minutes against Lille. He got a goal there as well. Footmob ratings are 7.2 in the first game, 9.0 in the second game, 7.7 in the third game. So really consistent there. He took that form into international duty and he scored after just a minute against Italy in France's Nations League match. They did go on to lose that game 3-1, but he got his goal.
Yeah.
They then went, well, he played really well there, so we'll bench him for Belgium. But they won anyway. They won 2-0. He came on late, but it didn't really make an impact. But yeah, really strong start to the season, and he seems to be replacing the output we saw from Mbappe.
Yeah, exactly that. It's a perfect time for Barcola to hit a rich vein of form, and I think that is exactly what he would have expected going into this season. Mbappe's gone. Now is the time for another superstar to shine. Now is the time for someone in that PSG side to step up. And Barcola is proving already that is probably going to be him across this season. He has looked phenomenal in the first few games. The fact he's doing it for France as well as PSG shows that he's not only replacing Mbappe at PSG, but that just overall he is in a really good vein of form. And I think the main thing he's going to want to do is perform really well, because not only does that show that PSG don't need Mbappe, but he won't want to. I mean, the Mbappe comparisons are going to come, but he doesn't want to be remembered as the guy, who stepped up from Mbappe. He wants to be known as himself, and he should be, because he's a very, very good footballer. But yeah, in terms of the end product, in terms of the numbers, Barcola looks like at this rate this season he's either going to match or better Kylian Mbappe.
Yeah, he's definitely performing well, and I think that front line seems much more functional. I think Enrique's done, worked wonders in that squad. He is a top coach. He's won Champions League titles before, La Liga titles before. He is a very accomplished manager, and I think everything looks positive for him in PSG this summer, and I think they'll continue in this at the start of the season. I think they'll continue in that manner. Let's talk about the Champions League, because that is ultimately the point of this video. They're doing very well in Ligue 1. They're going to win that because everyone else is terrible, and while De Zerbi and Marseille should be good, they keep signing loads of sex pests. So hopefully they don't win the league. However, it really is a battle of which team's worse over there. You've got one side, one team funded by Qatar, the other team buying loads of sex pests. Hopefully, for the sake of everyone, Nantes in third can win the league. But
go on, Nantes.
PSG in the Champions League, they've got a bit of a tough run to start. Girona in the opening match day. It's going to be an interesting one. Girona haven't really been torn apart too much. They are very much the side who were overperforming in La Liga last season. They've got Michel as manager, who I think is really good. So I think it'll be a difficult one. PSG have home advantage on their side, though, so I think they should get through that one. Then Arsenal away. That's a tough game.
It's tough, but there's something I know about Arsenal in Europe. It's that they're not very good.
But we've not. They were decent last year, quarterfinals.
Yeah, they lost to Bayern Munich. They should never have lost that Bayern Munich side.
That Bayern Munich side weren't great, but maybe they will be different this
year.
Maybe
that would be very interesting. I think the fact the Emirates could make a difference, but yeah, I think if Arsenal, there's one thing about Arsenal is they underachieve in Europe. Whatever the expectation is, they always underachieve it. Yeah. There's a chance there. If PSG go and get at least a point from that game, that's a big statement.
Yeah, definitely. So then PSV Eindhoven at home, that should be quite a comfortable victory. Atletico Madrid at home. It very much depends on whether Atleti can start getting Julian Alvarez firing. But they have been okay to start this season, Atleti, but there's just a few shortcomings. They've not scored enough goals. There's a reason they've drawn 2 matches so far. They realistically should have won every game they've played. They had quite a nice run in La Liga, but, they've not really had the goals. Yeah. Julian Alvarez is yet to score for them. So they are in a bit of a tough spot there. But this is the end of November, start of November, sorry. They should have it up and running by then.
And Simeone in Europe, you don't get the ball. You don't stamp your feet. And it's horrible. It's as an opposition against Simeone in Europe, it's the worst experience you'll ever have on a pitch.
Yeah, definitely. And then they play Bayern Munich away at the end of November, which should be a feisty one. I think, obviously, a repeat of the 2020 final. PSG, though, probably have the stronger side right now. Definitely the better manager. So they should win that one. Yeah. I'll be intrigued to see. Then they've got Salzburg away in December. That should be a win. And then January, they play Manchester City at home, which I think they'll probably lose. And then Stuttgart away. The problem for PSG is obviously you want to be in that top 8 to get automatic qualification. I just don't see them doing that. I don't think they're going to beat Arsenal. I don't think they're going to beat Manchester City. But you never know. Bayern is always a game they could lose. And then if there's one other slip up in there, they're nowhere near automatics.
No, I don't think
you've got to be
anyway.
nearly flawless to be automatics. We expect. Obviously, we've not seen this format before, so it might be chaos and everyone's losing all the time, and we have no idea who's going to go through. But if it, UEFA have probably done their simulations, so they'll have a good idea. But from our perspective, you probably need to win at least 6-7 games to go for automatics.
Yeah, probably.
So it's going to be an interesting one. I think they've got some tough fixtures. They've been handed a tough draw, which was a surprise. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Do you think PSG have got what it takes to win the Champions League this year?
No.
Why not? What are they missing then?
No. I'm going to rephrase it. I think PSG have got what it takes to win. They've got what it takes. They've got the players. They've got the quality. The problem is I think there are just too many teams ahead of them at the moment, which just tells me that I don't think they can go and win it. I think they've got what it takes. They've got the manager. They've got the backing. They've got the funding, and they've got the players. But the problem is there are just too many. I think City are ahead of them. I think Arsenal should be ahead of them. But as I said, you never know of Arsenal in Europe. Real Madrid are ahead of them. I think they'll
be.
Yeah.
I'm really concerned for Real Madrid this
season.
Yeah, but I think they've got the same problem PSG had with Mbappe, Neymar, Messi. There's no one in that front three doing any defensive.
I think domestically Real might struggle, but I think in the Champions League, when it comes to one-off games, Bellingham, Mbappe, Vinicius, they'll all score goals. It won't across 90 minutes. They will have enough quality to get across the line. But that, as you say, that'll be interesting to see. I think
I'm not sure.
I don't know. They're not They're definitely not. PSG aren't my favourites, but they're in with a shout. They are in with a shout. I think definitely.
Yeah, I think this is their time to strike. When Real Madrid have been dysfunctional to start the season, when Barcelona are one injury away from it all falling apart, where Bayern Munich have signed Vincent Kompany of all people to manage them. It definitely feels like this could be their year. I know the English clubs are going to be strong because they should be. Arsenal and Manchester City are very good teams. They should be right up there. But bar those two, I don't see another side that's on the same level as PSG. I think if Barcelona stay fit, they'll be up there this year. And Real Madrid are inevitable, usually. But I do have some doubts about them this season. So I think PSG are right up there. Yeah. Semi-finals has got to be the minimum.
Oh, 100%.
But the issue as well is that they've got to... Whatever happens this season, they can't tear it up.
No.
They can't throw Enrique off of a cliff, sell all their players, go and sign... I'm trying to think of old footballers that just... like Raheem Sterling and people like that. Don't do that. Just... Remain calm, Khalifi, if you're watching.
The other main thing for PSG is if they do get knocked out early, get knocked down to a City or an Arsenal or Real. Last year was Dortmund, wasn't it?
In the semi-finals they lost. They did well last season in the semis,
but they should never have lost to Dortmund. That Dortmund, I mean, no offense to Dortmund. I don't know how that side got to the Champions League final. They're nowhere near good.
Good coaching.
It was brilliant coaching.
They were the better team in the final.
The thing is, I think if this year's PSG side got the same run they did last year, they definitely get to the final. Because they'd have beaten Dortmund. I think the PSG side now. But when Terzic knew how to coach three big egos, or there was only two last one. Well, there was only one last year. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Terzic knew what he was doing. Like Borussia Dortmund side, they worked really well. They were incredible defensively throughout that semi-final because PSG were better in the semi-final, and it was Dortmund's defensive work that got them through. In the final, Dortmund was the better side. Manchester City got somewhat fortunate.
Real Madrid,
got somewhat fortunate. Yeah. But yeah, it was an interesting final. Anyway, PSG, I think they'll be right up there this year. They shouldn't drop anything in Ligue 1. If they do, that would be an awful shame unless it is to FC Nantes, but which we're all rooting for here. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, very much.
I think they're up there for the Champions League, and I think they will have the bigger picture for PSG is that next summer is their big opportunity, the FIFA Club World Cup. Do they just bin everything off and go hell for leather for the Club World Cup? Because that feels like something PSG are going to do, isn't it? That is so PSG.
Every the other players in the Club World Cup.
Just win that. But I think that'll be what they want to win. The prize money would mean they can spend everything they want, and they could go, well, we won this, so we have all the money now.
And they'd be best club in the world.
And they would have the inaugural Club World Cup. I think that'll be their goal. It seems to be Chelsea's goal as well at the moment. they seem to be pouring a lot of interest into the Club World Cup. So going to be interesting to see what happens with that. I don't know. I think fans will be interested once it comes around. I think there's a lot of people who struggle to get interested in it right now because it's a weird tournament. We're not used to having a Club World Cup, but in theory it should be interesting.
Yeah,
should be interesting. But that will be PSG's goal. Can they win the Club World Cup? I think they do qualify. I'm not really sure how. I thought it was all the Champions League winners, and then they just went, well, we're going to just let PSG in and other clubs for a laugh. But they are in that, and they'll be hoping to win that as well. So a lot to compete for this season. But they are playing well at the moment, and if we ignore the fact that they spent 1.4 billion to get here, they are closing in on a Champions League title, potentially, provided Al Khalifa doesn't do anything mental. So that's everything for today's video. We hope you have enjoyed, even if there's been lots of various twists and turns in our perspective throughout the video. Make sure to go and watch all of the videos we've made, but there will be one specific one on screen now if you want to go and click that, so go and give that a watch. But that is everything for today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we will see you next time.
See ya.